the fact that he's pointed his finger at something that seriously needs to be attended to and has paid a major price for it is also not ignorable. Let's start with something contentious, I suppose. Tammy and I went out on a limb recently and interviewed Tommy Robinson.
I saw.
I've been watching Tommy for a long time, and he's struck me as particularly interesting. Well, for two reasons. The first reason, I suppose, is because he is a genuine working class guy, and for better or worse. And second, I haven't seen anyone anywhere who's been more unwavering in his commitment to reveal the atrocities of the grooming gangs in the UK.
Get ready for an intense conversation between Douglas Murray and Jordan Peterson as they delve into the controversies surrounding Tommy Robinson's immigration issues and severe consequences of ignoring the public's concerns. In this clip, Murray presents a compelling case while Peterson navigates the conversation with careful insight. This is a deep dive into Britain's socialist tensions wrapped around Murray's unapologetic assessments. Expect bold statements, no holding back on these topics, and that few dare to tackle. Let's dive in and analyze where these arguments hit hardest.
Which are organized patterns of activity that are very pervasive, that are so terrible that it's almost impossible to talk about them without sounding like a conspiracy theorist. To me, and also to my wife, fair enough, but the fact that he's pointed his finger at something that seriously needs to be attended to and has paid a major price for it is also not ignorable. It's like, do we expect someone who's brave enough to do that to also be perfect in every regard? That's asking a bit much, given that there's many people who in principle have moral characters much more unsullied than Tommy Robinson, who are cowering in silence constantly in the face of this absolute brutal atrocity. And so we interviewed him. And what did I think of Tommy? He's very articulate. He can certainly make a case for himself. And then I thought it was up to the audience to listen and to make their own judgment. Now, that was before the recent march that Robinson and his crew organized in London, which in my estimation, I'm interested in your perspective, went as peacefully and well as the protests in Ottawa, which it was modeled after. And so I thought his crew handled that extraordinarily well.
Murray hints that Robinson's recent march was peaceful and well organized, directly challenging the mainstream's portrayal. This is a direct hit on those painting every Robinson-led event as chaotic. Murray's not backing down from his view that sometimes the public's narrative is wrong.
Now, in the aftermath of those protests, of course, all sorts of chaotic hell has broken.
Yes, and I wish it hadn't been so predictable. I wrote about this so many years, warned about it. The Strange Death of Europe was largely my last-ditch attempt to warn my own society of birth and other Western countries not to go down the path that they were precisely going down. And as a former government minister said in the Times a couple of days ago, the thing about my predictions on that was that I made them not with any glee, but in a spirit of deep lamentation about what was about to happen to my society. And as I see it, Tommy Robinson's a very interesting example of this whole thing. But let me just explain how I see it. This whole conflagration of recent days started when a 17-year-old went into a Taylor Swift dance class a couple of weeks ago now and started hacking at young girls with a knife. Killed 3 girls, 9-year-olds, thereabouts, wounded many others. And the news of that came out, and a very typical modern British, modern European, modern Western thing happened, which was that in the aftermath, people started to suspect something was being kept from them.
Murray touches on a deep distrust that's grown among the British public. This suspicion isn't random. He's saying it rooted in repeated instances of perceived cover-ups. People aren't just imagining things. They're reacting to real patterns, and it's raw commentary on how authorities handle sensitive events, often adding fuel to the fire.
But people started to sense that there was a cover-up of some kind, or at least the news was being managed. The police in Britain seem always to think they're being very clever at this, and it's always seemed to me that they exacerbate every problem they put their mind to. They insisted that the young man was originally from Cardiff, capital of Wales, and people just sense there's something they're holding from us. Sure enough. Anyway, the point is that very unpleasant, ugly, and again, evil forces can get unleashed at such a time, the spirit of revenge. And some protests started peacefully at first, then some violent. A mosque was targeted nearby, and then violence started to spread out to other towns. Then Muslim communities started to arm up, in some cases literally, with people turning up with knives to defend their areas. This is all, and maybe it'll die down by the time this podcast has gone out, or maybe it'll get a lot worse. But the one thing you can say with absolute certainty is it's not going to go away, because all of this is the consequence of what I call the problem of primary and secondary problems.
I've seen this reaction in the depths of my soul to many people. When I first came across your work, which is quite a long time ago now, I was leery of it. And I think the reason for that is that it's something like this, is that there are a lot of people in the world, and I'm not going to be able to meet all of them or read all of them or have anything to do with all of them. And now and then some of them get tarred with some epithet. Well, the cost to me of accepting that tarring is very low on average, because if I don't pay attention to some person, there's a whole bunch of other people I could pay attention to. So it's not like the pool of people to attend to shrinks, right? And that epithet of far right is a very effective brand of tarring. And it's even effective among people who are very skeptical of such things. So I'll give you an example. So I talked to Michael Schellenberger after he released the WPATH files, when he was investigating the absolute pathological corruption and craven cowardice of the cadre who presented what purport to be the standard guidelines for enlightened care to the American Medical Association, the American Psychiatric Association, the American Psychological Association. And he was appalled at their lack of competence and their ideological possession. It was another bottomless pit. And I asked him how he became aware of this. And he said, well, one way was that he had listened to Abigail Shrier and I talk about it. I guess it was 2 years ago when Abigail first put out her book, Irreversible Damage. It was the first podcast I did after I'd been so ill, and I was terrified to do it because it was such a hot topic. And, Schellenberger himself said he listened to that podcast, but he really couldn't believe it. And that's another example of the effectiveness of that tarring.
Yes.
It's so easy to demolish someone's reputation.
And it's especially easy to demolish a reputation for people who do not have, as it were, a backlog of published work.
Yeah, right,
I mean,
exactly.
it's relatively easy, but to weigh up someone's views and make an estimation of them if they have 7 books to their name, as I do, or thousands and thousands of articles. But it can't be the case that only book authors are allowed to say anything about the disintegration of their societies. It's not like you should only be left to people who write newspaper articles.
Yeah, well, God, no, not that. Like
maybe least of all. But then you go to this question, which has come up in Canada in recent years and is very live now in Britain, which is what are people allowed to do? Now, obviously, by the way, and I'm aware, as you always are, of the deep desire of bad faith actors to seize anything I say in this discussion and misrepresent it. So let me do a very boring piece of throat clearing, if I may. The idea that people's response to any problems in their society should be to go out and commit acts of violence is obviously insane and wrong. What we're seeing on the streets of the British cities, though, raises this question, as I say, of if the public keep saying something to the politicians and the politicians keep not just ignoring them, but insulting them.
Murray exposes the frustration of the British public who feel unheard and belittled by their own government. When voices get ignored, resentment builds. And his point, this isn't a minor grievance. It's an ever-growing divide that politicians ignore at their own risk. And this is a real warning shot.
What are they allowed to do, these people? These are populations that have every single election, like the rest of the British people, for 20 years, they have voted for less immigration and been told that they'd get it. And instead, it's just gone up.
I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. If you agree with a lot of the points made within this video, I always like to hear other people's opinions. Also, be sure to give us a like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. We'll see you guys in the next one.